Welcome back to Brick by Brick, the podcast where we break down the hidden forces shaping our digital world. Today, we're diving into the shadows of the internet to answer a burning question. Is the Silk Road back? Over a decade ago, the FBI took down the original Silk Road, the dark web's most infamous black market. But like a ghost in the machine, whispers of its return never really died. New markets rise, law enforcement cracks down, and yet the legend persists. So, is Silk Road 2.0 lurking in the depths of the dark web? Or is this just nostalgia for a bygone era of cybercrime? Stick around, because by the end of this episode, you'll understand whether the dark web's most notorious marketplace is truly making a comeback, or if it's gone for good.
All right, so you want to get right to the heart of it, right? You want to really understand something complex, but without all the, the headache of jargon and technical stuff.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're doing here today. Today, we are going deep into the dark web.
Okay.
Specifically, what's happened since the OG Silk Road. The one that kind of shook the whole online underworld?
Yeah, for sure. That first Silk Road,
Yeah.
the one that ran from 2011 to 2013 on the Tor network.
Right.
For those who maybe aren't as familiar, Tor is this decentralized network that makes your internet activity anonymous.
Right.
Basically bounces it through a bunch of different servers, so it's really hard to trace
Right, yeah.
where a connection is coming from or where it's going.
Yeah, it's like a Silk Road, basically.
It's like a big maze, right?
Yeah, it really became the place to go for illicit goods online.
Mm-hmm.
Racked up over $1.2 billion in transactions.
Wow.
All under the mysterious name of Dread Pirate Roberts.
Right, yeah.
Who we later found out was Ross Ulbricht. Yeah.
And when they took that down,
Huge deal.
it was a big deal.
Yeah, it felt like.
Yeah.
It felt like the end of something, but of course it wasn't.
No, not at all.
Almost immediately a successor popped up, right? Silk Road 2.0.
Exactly. Late 2013.
Yeah, like they didn't waste any time.
Yeah.
But then just as quick, in 2014, it got taken down in Operation Anonymous.
Yep.
Which really shows this pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
A dark web market shows up,
Mm-hmm.
law enforcement comes knocking.
Yeah.
So the big question for you today is, has the dark web really, come back in a big way since then?
I think it's the big question.
Yeah.
And to really understand where we are now, we have to kind of go back.
Okay.
Look at what happened right after those Silk Road shutdowns.
Yeah,
And you see other players trying to fill that void,
right.
like Alphabet and Hansa.
Oh, okay,
They
yeah.
became pretty big around 2017.
Alphabet and Hansa.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the next generation.
Yeah, you could say that.
What took them down?
Well, in 2017, law enforcement agencies, in a really coordinated global effort,
Mm-hmm.
managed to take down both of those marketplaces at the same time.
Wow.
And that was a big deal,
Yeah.
because it showed that,
Like a coordinated attack.
yeah, a real shift in how global agencies were working together to fight, these online illegal activities.
Right.
It wasn't just shutting down a website.
Yeah.
It was this much broader strategy.
They were learning, they were adapting.
For sure.
But the story doesn't end there,
Yeah.
right? Because I remember hearing about another marketplace.
Yeah.
That seemed to stick around for much longer.
You're probably thinking of Hydra Market.
Hydra Market.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Hydra is
Okay.
it mostly served Russian-speaking users.
Okay.
And it ran pretty successfully until 2022.
Wow.
That's when German and U.S. authorities finally seized it.
So it was a long run.
It was a good run.
So they were able to evade authorities for quite a while.
It shows you a couple of things.
Mhm.
Like the geographical differences in the dark web economy
Right.
and just how persistent these operations are,
Yeah.
even with law enforcement breathing down their necks.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when Hydra went down,
Yeah.
it left a big hole in the market.
Right.
But instead of one big player taking over,
Yeah.
it seems like we've got this kind of explosion of smaller, more niche marketplaces.
Okay, so instead of one big one, lots of little ones.
Yeah, exactly like the Incognito and Nemesis markets we're seeing now.
Incognito and Nemesis. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've seen this cycle, right?
Hmm?
We had Silk Road, then Alphabet and Hansa,
Yep.
then Hydra.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of feels like that game Whack-A-Mole, right?
Definitely a bit of that.
So in 2024, what's this all look like to you? What's the landscape?
I think the big thing now is fragmentation.
Okay, fragmentation.
Yeah. We're not seeing those, huge giants like the first Silk Road,
Yeah.
or even Alphabet when it was at its peak.
Right.
It's a lot of smaller, more specialized markets.
Okay.
Like I said, Incognito and Nemesis are a couple of examples that have popped up recently.
And were they any better at avoiding getting caught by law enforcement?
Not really, no.
No.
Incognito Market, for example, got seized in early 2024.
Oh, wow.
So it shows you that even though things are more spread out, law enforcement is still actively trying to shut them down.
Right.
Like you
It's
said.
like squeezing that balloon,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You push it down in one place,
Exactly.
it pops out somewhere else.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that's reportedly changed is the way they pay.
Yeah.
Bitcoin was the go-to in the beginning, right?
It was, yeah. Bitcoin was the main cryptocurrency being used in those early dark web markets,
Yeah.
including the original Silk Road.
Yeah.
But now you're seeing this shift towards cryptocurrencies
Okay.
that are built for more privacy,
Interesting.
like Monero XMR for short.
Like a Monero XMR.
Think of it like this Bitcoin transaction.
Yeah.
They leave a bit more of a trail because everything's recorded on this public ledger,
Right.
this blockchain.
Right.
So even though your name's not directly linked, there are ways to kind of analyze and trace the money.
I agree.
Monero, on the other hand,
Yeah.
it's designed to hide those tracks much better.
Okay.
Makes it way harder to trace transactions,
Right.
which is a problem for traditional blockchain analysis.
Yeah.
Because law enforcement now needs to come up with completely new techniques
Right.
to track those funds.
So it's like they're always one step ahead.
It's a constant arms race.
So it's not just where they're doing business, but how they're handling the money.
Right.
It's all changing.
Exactly. And it's not just drugs anymore either.
Oh, right. Yeah, the stuff they're selling is expanded too, right?
Yeah, it's really diversified.
What else are we talking about here?
Well, drugs are still a big part of it, but you also have this whole market for things like ransomware as a service.
Ransomware as a service. What is that?
So basically, people or groups can rent the tools and the infrastructure
Wow.
to launch ransomware attacks.
So you don't even need to know how to do it.
It lowers the barrier to entry.
Wow.
Stolen data is another big one.
Okay.
Remember when the DOJ seized Genesis Market in 2023?
Genesis Market, yeah.
That was a huge marketplace for stolen credentials.
Like what kind of stuff?
Social security numbers, bank logins,
Oh, wow.
email addresses, all sorts of personal information.
That's scary.
And then you've got things like fake passports,
Fake pass.
driver's licenses, other fraudulent documents.
So it's like a whole shadow economy.
It really is.
Wow.
It's pretty comprehensive.
So even though these markets might not last as long,
Right.
the stuff they're trading is just getting bigger and bigger.
It seems that way, yeah.
Okay, so on the other side, how are law enforcement agencies changing to deal with all of this?
Yeah.
It sounds like they're not just sitting back.
They're definitely not.
Yeah.
They've come a long way since the early days of Silk Road. Okay.
You know, you see operations like Operation Spectre in 2023,
Operation Spectre.
which was specifically aimed at fentanyl trafficking on the dark web.
Okay.
This shows a much higher level of global cooperation. They're working together across borders
That's good.
to tackle these problems.
Yeah.
And even earlier Operation Animus, the one that took down Silk Road 2.0,
Right.
that was a key example of that kind of global teamwork.
Yeah.
They were going after the very structure that supports hidden services on Tor.
Wow. So really going after the foundation.
Trying to.
What about technology? What kind of advancements are they making?
Well, blockchain analysis has become a crucial tool.
Right.
Companies like Chainalysis,
Yeah.
they've developed some pretty sophisticated ways to trace Bitcoin transactions,
Right.
which, like we said, makes Bitcoin less attractive
Yeah.
if you're really trying to stay anonymous.
Right.
On top of that, authorities are using AI more and more
Artificial intelligence.
to analyze tons of data.
Right. Trying to find patterns, trace transactions, even get into those online forums and communities
Well,
that these groups use.
So it's like a high-tech game of cat and mouse.
It really is.
But the people on the other side, the sellers and the buyers, they're also changing how they communicate, right?
Absolutely.
How so?
Europol's noticed that more and more people are using encrypted messaging apps,
Okay.
like Telegram.
Telegram.
Yeah, they're calling it kind of like a new dark web. These platforms offer a lot more privacy and encryption.
Right.
Makes it harder for law enforcement to keep track of things
Right.
compared to those old school dark web marketplaces.
Okay, so let's get back to that original question.
Yeah.
Has the dark web really made a comeback since the original Silk Road?
Right.
It sounds like the way it works, the whole model has changed.
That's the key point.
Yeah.
That old way of having one big, stable marketplace,
Right.
like Silk Road,
Yeah.
it's pretty much gone. Dark web markets today,
Yeah.
they tend to be much more temporary.
Okay.
They pop up, they run for a bit, and then
And then what?
often they disappear with what's called an exit scam.
Exit scam. What's that?
It's a big problem with this fragmented landscape.
Yeah.
You have a marketplace,
Yeah.
seems legit,
Right.
but then suddenly the operators shut it all down.
Oh, wow.
And they take off with all the cryptocurrency that users had put in escrow
Wow.
for transactions that were still pending.
So people just lose their money.
Buyers and sellers are left high and dry.
That's a huge risk.
It is a huge risk.
So it's not just about getting caught by the authorities.
Yeah,
You could get ripped off by the market itself.
exactly.
Now, I remember seeing some data
Yeah,
that showed dark web activity actually going down overall.
that's right.
What's the story there?
Well, there's a report from Chainalysis,
Okay.
and they found that dark web revenue dropped significantly in 2023.
How much are we talking?
Around 65%. 65%, that's a lot. It is a big drop.
So what does that mean?
It could mean that people are moving away
Yeah.
from those big marketplace models
Right.
and going towards smaller, more agile,
Right.
harder to track operations.
So like we were saying,
Exactly.
you're adapting.
They're always adapting.
But if it's just shifting to these smaller channels,
Right?
how do we really know if the revenue's actually gone down?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, it could just be harder to see.
Exactly.
So what does cybersecurity experts say about all of this?
Well, the general feeling seems to be that
Yeah.
while things have changed, the structure, the methods,
Yeah.
the heart of the dark web, the activity itself,
Hmm.
that's still there.
So it's still alive and kicking.
One expert even called it a cat and mouse game.
A cat and mouse game.
Yeah,
So law enforcement might win some battles.
right.
They might take down a market or arrest some key players. But the demand for illegal stuff and these anonymous spaces online,
It keeps the whole thing going.
just like that Hydra monster, right?
Yeah.
You cut off one head, 2 more grow back.
Pretty much.
It makes you wonder if law enforcement can ever really catch up.
It's a tough question.
Okay, so to sum it all up,
Yeah.
has the dark web come back the way it was with the original Silk Road?
The big takeaway here is no.
Okay, no.
It hasn't come back in that same centralized way.
Right.
It's evolved, it's fragmented, it's more resilient,
Mm-hmm.
and it's using new technologies.
Like those privacy coins and encrypted apps.
Exactly.
So we might see new markets calling themselves Silk Road,
Yeah.
but they're probably not going to have the same kind of free reign.
Right. The environment's a lot tougher now.
Yeah.
Law enforcement's way more advanced.
And coordinated globally.
Exactly.
So even if that Dread Pirate Roberts figure never really returns,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like the demand for these hidden online spaces,
Right.
that's what's driving everything.
That's the core of it.
So as long as there's that demand,
Yeah.
the dark web's going to keep changing and adapting.
Exactly. And that raises some big questions.
Yeah.
About privacy, about security,
Right.
about how law enforcement needs to evolve.
Yeah.
It's this constant back and forth.
Yeah.
This arms race.
And the move towards more decentralization and privacy,
Mm-hmm.
that's creating a whole new set of challenges.
It definitely is.
It's something to think about.
Definitely.
It's a whole new world out there.
Yeah.
And it's not going away anytime soon.
I don't think so.